The group of teens quickly spiraled into a hacking frenzy and became prime targets for the FBI, hacking into Epic, Microsoft, Activision, and even the US military, stealing over $100 million. This is the story of the Xbox Underground. This video would not be possible without Brendan Corner, the American author from Wired. There's a link in the description to his article. The journey to Delaware was originally intended to be a one-day affair. David Pecora, a senior at the University of Toronto in Canada, had a specific purpose for the trip: to retrieve a bumper he had purchased for his customized Volkswagen Golf. The seller of the bumper was an American, and he didn't want to ship it to Canada. So Pecora coordinated it to have it delivered to his friend, Justin May, residing in Wilmington. While both young men were gamers, they had also shared an interest in the inner workings of the Xbox. They had never met face to face, even though they communicated and collaborated online for years. Pecora's plan was simple: embark on an 8-hour drive on a Friday, enjoy dinner with May, and then transport the bumper back to his home in Mississauga, either that night or early the next morning. His father offered to accompany them, allowing them to share the driving duties in the family Jetta. About an hour into their journey, on March 28th, 2014, the Pecora family crossed the Lewiston-Queenston Bridge and reached the border checkpoint on the eastern side of the Niagara Gorge. An American customs agent, while scanning their passports, kindly asked about their travel plans. He appeared ready to wave the Jetta through when something on his screen captured his attention. "What's Xenon?" the agent asked, who stumbled to try to pronounce the word. For David, who was in the passenger seat, this question came as a shock. Xenon was one of his online aliases. He frequently used it in the world of gaming, particularly when playing Halo or discussing Xbox hacking projects with fellow programmers. The question arose: why did this particular nickname, which is only familiar to a select group of people, appear during passport verification? After a brief moment of confusion, Pecora remembered that he had named his one-man company Xenon Development Studios. This business was responsible for managing payments of the Xbox service he operated, providing monthly subscribers with the capability to unlock achievements or skip levels in over 100 different games. He informed the agent about his legitimate business, making sure to emphasize that it was legally registered. The agent then instructed the Pecoras to remain seated for a little longer. While they waited for permission to enter West New York, a sense of unease crept over David, as he noticed a slight commotion behind the stationary Jetta. He turned around to observe two men in dark uniforms approaching the vehicle, one on each side. His father remarked, "Something's wrong?" just before a figure appeared outside the passenger side window. It was then that David Pecora realised he had walked into a carefully laid trap. Pecora found himself in the detention area of the Border Protection Building, a room containing only a solitary metal bench. Pecora was reflecting on the numerous reckless risks he had taken during his obsession with the Xbox. A decade earlier, when he had first dove into dissecting the console's software, it had seemed like harmless fun, a means for him and his friends to match wits with the corporate engineers they aspired to become. However, the Xbox hacking community had gradually transformed over time, with its ethical standards changed by the attraction of money, excitement, and status. Pecora had been progressively drawn into the web of schemes that would horrify his younger self, infiltrating networks of game developers, counterfeiting an Xbox prototype, and even aiding in a break-in at Microsoft's main campus. Pecora had long been aware that his illegal activities had provoked a formidable adversary, not solely within the gaming industry. In their quest to explore the Xbox secrets, he and his associates had infiltrated US military networks. But in those early hours following his arrest, Pecora remained oblivious to the extent of legal consequences he had unleashed upon himself. He had been under sealed indictments for the last 8 months, accused of conspiracy to steal intellectual property valued at up to $1 billion. And federal prosecutors were determined to make him the first foreign hacker convicted for stealing American trade secrets. Regrettably, his actions would draw several of his friends and collaborators into a whirlpool of problems he had played a part in creating. One would become an informant, another a fugitive, and a third would meet an unfortunate end. From the detention area, Bakura glanced towards his father, who was seated in an adjacent room, separated by thick glass, a Polish-born construction worker. Bakura observed a federal agent leaning down to break the news to his father that his son would not be returning to Canada for a very long time. His father responded by burying his head in his hands. Devastated by the pain he had caused his otherwise composed father, David wished he could offer words of comfort. In a soft voice, he said, "It's going to be okay, Dad," attempting to get his father's attention. "It's going to be okay." Unfortunately, his father remained oblivious to his words, separated by the glass barrier. Long before he could ever read or write, David Bakura had already mastered the complexity of first-person shooter games. In a grainy video dating back to 1995, his 3-year-old fingers effortlessly danced across the keyboard of his parents' PC, while he played Blakestone, Aliens of Gold. What fascinated him about the game wasn't the violence, but rather the magic of its controls. He was intrigued by how the boxing machine could translate his physical movements into on-screen actions. It was evident from an early age that Bakura was a natural programmer. Bakura began experimenting with coding during his elementary school years, even creating basic web browsers. However, his true passion for gaming showed during a family trip to Poland when he was young. Armed with his bulky laptop in an old-fashioned town where his parents' relatives lived, Bakura started teaching himself the Visual Basic.NET programming language. With no internet access in the house, he couldn't rely on Google to troubleshoot errors in his code. Nevertheless, he persistently worked on refining his code until it was flawless. A difficult process that unexpectedly filled him with joy. By the time he returned home, he was captivated by the emotional reward of bending machines to his will. As Bakura became increasingly interested in programming, his family acquired his first Xbox, with its capacity to connect to multiplayer sessions through Xbox Live and its familiar window-based architecture. The console made Bakura's Super Nintendo seem outdated. When not engaging in alien battles on Halo, Bakura searched the internet for technical knowledge about his newfound obsession. His online journey led him to a community of hackers who were pushing the boundaries of what the Xbox could do. To uncover its secrets, the hackers disassembled the console, intercepting data flowing between the motherboard's components, the CPU, the RAM, and the flash chip. This revealed what cryptography expert Bruce Schneier referred to as numerous elementary school mistakes. For instance, Microsoft carelessly left the decryption key of the machine's boot code accessible in a specific area of the console's memory. When an MIT graduate student named Bunny Huang located this in 2002, he told fellow hackers, allowing them to manipulate the Xbox. The Xbox was then able to run homebrew programs. It was capable of streaming music, running Linux, or emulating Sega and Nintendo games. These modifications involved firmware alteration, such as soldering a mod chip onto the motherboard, or loading a hacked game save file via USB. Once Bakura had successfully hacked his family Xbox, he started to look into the world of customizing his beloved Halo. He visited IRC Channels and web forums, where the most skilled Halo programmers gathered, reading tutorials on altering the game's physics. Soon, he gained recognition by developing Halo 2 utilities that enabled players to transform any in-game environment with digitized water or change clear skies into rain. However, the era of open-ended hacking came to an end with the introduction of the second generation Xbox, the Xbox 360, in November 2005. Unlike its predecessor, the 360 lacked in glaring security flaws that enabled young hackers like the 13-year-old Bakura to run unauthorized code. A potential loophole for frustrated hackers did exist, but it demanded access to a rare piece of hardware, an Xbox 360 development kit. Dev kits are typically reserved for Microsoft-approved game developers and contain the critical software necessary for game development, including line-by-line debugging tools. A hacker with access to a dev kit can manipulate Xbox software much like an unauthorized programmer. Microsoft exclusively distributed dev kits to specific game development companies. While a handful of kits might become available when a bankrupt developer liquidated its assets, such hardware was a rare sight. Nevertheless, there was a hacker who stumbled upon a horde of Xbox 360 dev kits, and driven by a desire to profit from this fortunate discovery, would help propel Bakura to the peak of the Xbox hacking community. In 2006, while working as a technology manager at Wells Fargo in Walnut Creek, California, Rowdy Van Cleve, a 38-year-old Xbox enthusiast, stumbled upon an intriguing opportunity. He learned that a local recycling facility was selling Xbox DVD drives at bargain price. Eager to explore this potential goldmine, Van Cleve visited the facility, where the owners revealed that they regularly received Microsoft hardware. Given his involvement with Team Avalanche, a respected Xbox hacking group, Van Cleve volunteered to inspect the recycler's warehouse in search of discarded Xbox components with resale value. After sifting through heaps of Xbox equipment, Van Cleve managed to persuade the recycler to let him take home 5 Xbox motherboards. Plugging one of them into his Xbox 360, he was astonished to find that it gave him the opportunity to activate debugging mode. He recognised this as the developer's motherboard. Realising the immense value of what he had uncovered, Van Cleve struck a deal with the recyclers, enabling him to purchase any discarded Xbox hardware they acquired. While he kept some of those findings for his own sizable collection, he generously distributed them to friends. Van Cleve was always on the lookout for discreetly paying customers. In 2008, the 16-year-old David Bakura became one of those trusted customers. His introduction to Van Cleve came through an online friend who vouched for his technical expertise. In addition to obtaining development kits for himself, Bakura began selling these kits on behalf of Van Cleve. His price point was approximately $1,000 per kit, though some enthusiasts desperate to gain access paid as much as $3,000. Bakura's customers included Justin May, a resident of Wilmington, Delaware. With an ample supply of dev kits, Bakura delved into the world of modding the recently released Halo 3. He would work late into the night, frequently losing track of time, often continuing his coding until 3 or 4 AM. His commitment to hacking caused him to arrive late at school, leading to declining grades. Yet, Bakura remained unfazed, believing that his development kit programming was the only education that truly mattered. Bakura began sharing snippets of his Halo 3 work on forums like halomods.com, attracting the attention of a hacker from California named Anthony Clark. Clark, who was 18 at the time, had experience disassembling Xbox games, translating their code from machine language to programming language. He approached Bakura and suggested they collaborate on various projects. Clark and Bakura shared a strong connection, discussing programming and shared interests in music, cars, and other typical teenage things. Bakura sold Clark a development kit to facilitate their cooperative work on hacking Halo 3. In return, Clark offered tips on the art of disassembling code. They co-authored a Halo 3 tool, allowing them to give special abilities to the main character, Master Chief. This included the power of leaping into the clouds by shooting unusual projectiles. They spent countless hours playing their modified creations on PartnerNet, an Xbox Live sandbox accessible only to dev kit owners. As they released segments of their software online, Bakura and Clark began receiving feedback from engineers at Microsoft and Bungie, the developers behind the Halo series. These professional programmers, who were aware of Bakura and Clark's use of unauthorized dead kits, offered praise. Despite the ethical problems, this encouragement boosted Bakura's belief that he was creating an unorthodox path to a career in game development. Perhaps the only available avenue for a construction worker's son, who didn't excel in the classroom. Nonetheless, Bakura and Clark occasionally engage in risky adventures. By 2009, the two had expanded their activities on PartnerNet to include swiping unreleased software still in testing. At one point, Bakura shared a screenshot of an unreleased Halo 3 map with friends, inadvertently causing it to circulate among Halo fans. Despite receiving a warning message left for them by Bungie engineers on the game's main screen, which read, "Winners don't break into PartnerNet," the two hackers regarded their actions as harmless fun. Their motivation was born out of deep love of Xbox, not a desire for personal gain. They hoped to eventually become colleagues with the Xbox professionals they were challenging. The Xbox 360 remained secure until late 2009, when a vulnerability was at last uncovered by security researchers. They discovered a weakness in the console's defense. By attaching a mod chip to a specific set of motherboard pins initially intended for quality assurance testing, they effectively neutralized the system's security. This exploit was later named JTAG, after the Joint Test Action Group. They had originally suggested adding these pins to all printed circuit boards in the 1980s. The revelation of this vulnerability led Xbox 360 owners to seek out services for JTAGing their consoles. With 23 million subscribers on Xbox Live, multiplayer gaming had intensified significantly, and a group of gamers Bakura referred to as spoiled kids with their parents' credit cards were willing to go to great lengths to outclass their competitors. For Bakura and Clark, this became a golden opportunity. They hacked the Call of Duty series, a collection of military-themed shooters, to establish modded lobbies on Xbox Live. Call of Duty players could join matches governed by mind-bending rules, for fees ranging up to $100 for half an hour. Players with J-tagged consoles could partake in deathmatches with superhuman abilities, flying, passing through walls, sprinting with incredible speed, or firing bullets that never missed. For an additional fee, ranging of $50 to $150, Bakura and Clark offered infections, which enabled players to retain their enhanced abilities when playing non-hacked lobbies. Initially unwilling to sell the infections due to the ensuing chaos, Bakura reconsidered once the money began pouring in, with earnings on some days reaching up to $8,000. The surge in demand caused them to hire employees to manage the business. Caught up in the exhilaration of entrepreneurship, Bakura lost sight of his commitment to fairness, unwittingly taking another step down a compromising path. In response to breaches like the Call of Duty cheats, Microsoft introduced an automated system to detect J-tagged consoles and ban them. However, Bakura reverse engineered the system, developing a method to outsmart it. He created a program that manipulated Xbox Live security questions, directing them to a section of the console where they could be filled with false data, thus deceiving the system into approving a hacked console. Bakura savoured the rewards of his success. While he still lived with his parents, he was now able to cover his tuition as he began his studies at the University of Toronto in the fall of 2010. He and his girlfriend indulged in nightly upscale restaurant dining and stayed in $400 a night hotels as they travelled to metal shows across Canada. However, money and recognition were not his primary motivations. He derived immense pleasure and a sense of control from making multi-million-dollar games bend at his will. Bakura was well aware that his Call of Duty enterprise had questionable legality, entailing numerous copyright violations. Yet, the absence of substantial pushback from both Microsoft and Activision, the developer of Call of Duty, gave him the impression that these companies were willing to tolerate his activities, similar to how Bungie had tolerated his Halo 3 stunts. Although Activision did send a series of cease and desist letters, they never followed through on their threats. To justify his actions, Pecora frequently reminded himself, "It's just a video game. We're not hacking into a server or stealing anyone's information." Little did he know that this would change soon enough. Dylan Wheeler, a hacker based in Perth, Australia, known by the alias Super DAE, had an intriguing opportunity come his way. A friend from the United States, who went by the name Gamer Freak, shared a list of passwords for the public forums hosted by Epic Games, a renowned game developer based in North Carolina, known at the time for creating titles like Unreal and Gears of War, and are now more known for their popular game Fortnite. In 2010, Wheeler began exploring the forum's accounts to identify Epic Games employees. Eventually, he discovered a member of the company's IT department with credentials on Gamer Freak's list. By looking into the individual's personal emails, Wheeler uncovered a password for an internal epicgames.com account. With a foothold within Epic, Wheeler searched for a capable partner to penetrate deeper into the network. He pondered who was significant enough to be interested in something like this. And the name of Xenomega, David Pecora, a hacker he greatly admired from afar, was the first to come to mind. Wheeler sent a message to the Canadian, offering him the chance to infiltrate one of the world's foremost gaming developers. However, he left out the fact that he was only 14 years old, fearing that his age might deter Pecora. What Wheeler proposed was significant, more unsettling than anything Pecora had ventured into before. While downloading Halo maps from the semi-public partner net was one thing, breaching a fortified private network containing a company's most sensitive data was another. To rationalise their actions, Pecora and Wheeler set ground rules. They pledged not to acquire credit card information or look into personal details of Epic customers. Together, Pecora and Wheeler navigated Epic's network by posing as an IT employee whose login credentials had been compromised by Wheeler. They stumbled upon a USB drive containing all the company's passwords, including one that granted them root access to the entire network. They delved into the computers of Epic's well-known figures, including design director Cliff Bleszinski. They shared a laugh upon discovering Bleszinski's music folder for his Lamborghini was filled with Katy Perry and Miley Cyrus tracks. Bleszinski confirmed the hacker's account and openly acknowledged his preference of pop music. From the extraction of Epic's data, Wheeler enlisted the assistance of Sanado Neshiwat, a New Jersey gamer who possessed a modified cable modem that could obscure its location. In 2011, Neshiwat downloaded a pre-released version of Gears of War 3, along with hundreds of gigabytes of other software from Epic. He burned Epic's source code onto 8 Blu-ray discs, disguising them as wedding videos, and shipping them to Pecora. Pecora shared the game with friends, including his dev kit customer Justin May. In a matter of days, a copy of the game appeared on the Pirate Bay, a well-known BitTorrent site. The leak of Gears of War 3 triggered a federal investigation, and Epic began collaborating with the FBI to determine how their security had been breached. Pecora and Wheeler became aware of the ongoing investigation through their readings of Epic's emails. In a state of panic, Pecora reached out to May in July, pleading for him and expressing a need to encrypt some hard drives to avoid arrest. However, the communication between Epic and the FBI eventually dwindled, and the company took no visible action to remove the hackers' root access to the network, indicating they were unable to pinpoint the entry method. With their first encounter with the law behind them, the hackers felt more confident, particularly the audacious Wheeler. He continued to intrude into sensitive sections of Epic's network, making little effort to hide his IP address as he monitored high-level corporate meetings to compromise webcams. Owning access to Epic's networks allowed the hackers entry into various other organizations. Pecora and Wheeler stumbled upon login credentials from Scaleform, a middleware company, that provided technology for the core of Epic's games. Once inside Scaleform, they uncovered a multitude of credentials from Silicon Valley giants, Hollywood entertainment conglomerates, and Zombie Studios, the developer behind the Spec Op game series. Within Zombie's network, they found remote access, tunnels leading into its clients, including segments of the US military. Navigating through these insecure tunnels was not particularly challenging, but Bakura remained cautious and tried not to leave too many digital traces. If they notice any of this, they're going to come looking for me. As their operation expanded, the hackers discussed how to respond if the FBI came knocking. High on the feeling of power that came from infiltrating seemingly impenetrable networks, Bakura proposed the release of all Epic's proprietary data as an act of revenge. If we ever go disappearing, just you know, uploading it to the internet, and say, F you Epic. The group also engaged in banter about what they would call their prison gang. Wheeler's tongue-in-cheek suggestion that they could intimidate other inmates by naming themselves the Xboxer Underground. Bakura found himself increasingly captivated by his ventures into the corporate networks, causing concern among his old Xbox scene friends. Kevin Skitzo, a hacker from Team Avalanche, implored him to take a step back. Dude, just stop this, he urged Bakura. Focus on school, because this, I get it, it's a high, but as technology advances and law enforcement become more aware, you can only dodge the bullet for so long. However, Bakura was too deeply immersed in the excitement of collecting forbidden software to listen to Kevin. In September 2011, he stole a pre-release copy of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, saying to his friends as he initiated the download, "Let's get arrested." While he showed confidence as he navigated networks without consequence, Bakura continued to take pride in his indifference to money. After obtaining a database containing numerous PayPal accounts, Bakura applauded himself for resisting the law of profiting the accounts. We could have already sold them for bitcoins, which would have been untraceable if we did it right. It could have easily been a quick 50 grand. Yet, with each passing week, Bakura became increasingly greedy. In November 2011, he tasked his friend May with arranging a deal with Xbox Dev Guy, a gamer interested in purchasing pre-release games. Bakura was willing to supply any titles Xbox Dev Guy desired for several $100s each. Bakura's close relationship with May made his fellow hackers uneasy. They knew that May had been arrested at a Boston gaming convention in March 2010 for attempting to download the source code for the first-person shooter Breach. May had suggested he could provide information about more prominent individuals and name names when arrested. However, Bakura trusted May based on his shared involvement in numerous illegal activities. Unable to fathom that someone collaborating with law enforcement could engage in so many criminal endeavours. By the spring of 2012, Bakura and Wheeler focused on infiltrating Zombie Studios. Two new members, Austin Alcala from an Indiana high school and Nathan Lurox, a homeschooled student, joined the group. Lurox in particular was an outstanding talent, having co-authored a program that tricked Electronic Arts soccer game FIFA 2012 into generating virtual coins used for character upgrades. While navigating Zombie's network, the group discovered a tunnel leading to a US Army server, which had a simulator of the AH-64D Apache helicopter that Zombie Studios developed under a Pentagon contract. In a bold move, Wheeler downloaded the software and proposed selling the simulations to the Arab world. The hackers were also preoccupied with tormenting Microsoft, stealing documents containing information from an early version of the Durango, the codename for the next generation Xbox, later known as the Xbox One. Rather than selling the documents to a Microsoft rival, the hackers devised a more intricate plan, counterfeiting and selling Durangos themselves, using off-the-shelf components. Lurox offered to assemble the console in exchange of a share of the earnings, as he needed money to fund online computer science classes at the University of Maryland. The hackers reached out to a buyer who was willing to pay $5,000 for the counterfeit console. May picked up the complete machine from Lurox's house and committed to shipping it to the Indian Ocean. However, the Durango never reached its destination. Paranoia set in as the buyer complained. Had the FBI intercepted the shipment? Were they now all under surveillance? Wheeler was particularly unsettled, thinking that after the Epic investigation appeared to have stopped, the group was about to be hit with another case. He pondered, how do we end this game? The answer he arrived at was to go out in a blaze of glory, doing things that would secure his place in Xbox folklore. Wheeler initiated his quest for notoriety by listing a Durango for sale on eBay, using photographs of the one Lurox had built. Bidding for the non-existent machine reached over $20,000 before eBay cancelled the auction, citing fraud. Infuriated by the media attention the episode granted, Bakura ended contact with Wheeler. A few weeks later, Lurox vanished from the scene, with rumours swirling that he had been raided by the FBI. Americans close to Bakura began to express concerns about being tailed by black cars with tinted windows, suspecting the presence of an informant among them. The relationship between Bakura and Clark weakened, as Bakura delved deeper into hacking developers. Their rift ultimately revolved around staffing issues in their Call of Duty business. They disagreed about certain employees, with Bakura demanding them greedy, while Clark refused to address the issue. Frustrated with the constant discord, both men drifted into other endeavours. Bakura shifted his focus to Horizon, an Xbox cheating service he developed on the side with friends. He appreciated that Horizon's cheats couldn't be used on Xbox Live, reducing potential technical and legal complications. Meanwhile, Clark refined Lurox's FIFA Coin minting technology and began selling virtual currency on the black market. Austin Alcala, who had taken place in the Zombie Studios hack and the Xbox One counterfeiting machines, joined Clark's new adventure. While the 20-year-old Bakura divided his time between overseeing Horizon and attending university, Wheeler continued his attention-grabbing tasks. Following his eBay stunt, Microsoft sent a private investigator named Mars Hawks to Perth to confront him. Wheeler posted about meeting Mr. Microsoft Man on Twitter, claiming that Hawks inquired about his collaborators. According to Wheeler, Hawks assured him that he didn't need to worry about legal repercussions, as Microsoft was only interested in pursuing real a-holes. In December 2012, the FBI conducted a raid at Neshiwat's home in New Jersey. Wheeler responded by doxing the agents involved in a public forum, encouraging harassment and openly discussing hiring a hitman to assassinate the federal judge who issued the search warrant. Wheeler's tendency to escalate situations alarmed federal prosecutors who had been building a case against the hackers since the Gears of War leak in June 2011. Edward McAndrews, the assistant US attorney leading the investigation, felt pressure to speed up their efforts, fearing that Wheeler's actions could lead to real violence. On the morning of February 19th, 2013, Wheeler was working at his family's Perth home when he noticed a commotion in the yard below. A group of individuals in tactical gear, with Glocks holstered by their sides, approached the house. Wheeler quickly shut down his computers, ensuring that anyone analysing his hardware would have to at least crack his passwords. Over the next few hours, Australian police seized over $20,000 worth of computer equipment. Wheeler wasn't arrested that day, but his hard drives yielded substantial incriminating evidence, including a screenshot of his hacking exploits and discussions about running some crazy program to mess up the fans on Zombie Studio servers. In July, Bakura informed Justin May of his plans to attend Defqon, the annual hacking convention in Las Vegas, marking his first trip across the border in years. On July 23rd, McAndrews and his team filed a sealed 16 counter-indictment against Bakura, Neshiwat and Lurox, charging them with crimes such as wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to steal trade secrets. Wheeler and Gamer Freak, the original source of the Epic's password lists, were named in the unindicted co-conspirators. Alcala would be added as a defendant 4 months later. The document revealed that the government's case relied on evidence provided by an informant referred to as Person A, a Delaware resident who had picked up the counterfeit Durango from Lurox's house and handed it over to the FBI. The defendants were also characterized as members of the Xbox Underground, a reference that turned Wheeler's earlier prison gang joke into reality. Despite knowing nothing about the sealed indictments, Pecora withdrew from attending Defqon at the last moment. The FBI was concerned that arresting his co-conspirators might prompt him to flee, so they decided to wait for Pecora to cross the border before taking action. 2 months later, Pecora went to a show by a Swedish metal band at the Toronto Opera House. As he enjoyed the warm-up act's performance, his phone buzzed with a message from Alcala, a high school senior who was excited about a contact offering the latest Durango prototypes. This contact was willing to break into a building on Microsoft's campus to steal them, demanding Microsoft's game developer network login credentials and several $1,000s in exchange. Pecora found the aspiring burglar's bravery baffling, but instructed Alcala to connect them. The burglar, known as R-Man the Cyber, had recently graduated from high school. A year prior, he cloned a Microsoft employee's badge that belonged to his mother's boyfriend, gaining unauthorized access to the campus, even dressing in Microsoft swag to blend in. The 18-year-old had previously stolen a Durango for personal use. He was anxious about returning for more, but still wanted to do it. Late one Saturday night, Armin entered the building housing the Durangos after swiping his way in. A few engineers were still in the hallways, so Armin hid in cubicles when he heard footsteps. He eventually ascended to the 5th floor, where he believed the Durangos were stored. However, motion detectors sensed his presence, flooding the room with lights. Startled, Armin retreated downstairs. He finally discovered 2 Durangos on the 3rd floor, one of which had a pair of stiletto heels placed on top. Armin placed both cubicles in an oversized backpack and left the high heel shoes on the carpet. A week after sending the stolen Durangos to Pecora and Alcala, Armin received surprising news. Microsoft had reviewed an employment application he had submitted that summer and hired him as a quality assurance tester. His employment lasted only a couple of weeks before investigators identified him as the Durango thief, with a stairwell camera capturing his exit from the building. In an effort to mitigate the legal consequences, he pleaded with Pecora and Alcala to return the stolen consoles. He also returned the Durango he had stolen for personal use. Just in time, as envious hackers had been researching his house online for a robbery. Throughout the winter, Pecora was engrossed in hacking Xbox 360 games for Horizon. But as Toronto began defrosting out in March 2014, he considered setting aside a weekend to drive to Delaware and collect the bumper he had ordered for his Volkswagen Golf. As they prepared to leave, he humorously told his father, "You know, there's a chance I could get arrested." But his father brushed it off as a joke, unaware of the serious situation. After an initial appearance at the federal courthouse in Buffalo and a brief stay in a nearby county jail, Pecora found himself in a van alongside another federal inmate, a burly gang member with a powerful build and no visible neck. He was a big guy. They were on their way to a private prison in Ohio, where Pecora would remain until the court in Delaware was ready to proceed with his case. The guards rudely tossed their sandwiches onto the van's floor, knowing that the shackled prisoners couldn't reach him. During the 3-hour journey, the gang member, who was serving time for using a hammer to beat a man, advised Pecora to do whatever it took to minimize his time behind bars. "This life ain't for you," he said. "This life ain't for nobody, really." Pecora heeded this advice when he arrived in Delaware in early April 2014. He promptly accepted the offered plea deal and aided the victimized companies in identifying their vulnerabilities he had exploited. For instance, he highlighted the lightly protected tunnels that allowed him to hop between networks. As Pecora explained his hacks with professional flair during the interviews, Edward McAndrews, the leading prosecutor, developed a certain admiration for the Canadian, who was now 22 years old. McAndrews said, "He's a very talented kid who started down a bad path. A lot of times when you investigate these things, you have to have a certain level of admiration for the brilliance and creativity of the work. But then you kind of step back and say, here's where it went wrong." One day, on the way from jail to court, Pecora found himself in a marshal's vehicle with someone who looked familiar. It was Nathan Lurox, a pale 20-year-old he had never met in person, but recognised from a photo. Lurox had been arrested on March 31st in Madison, Wisconsin, after dropping out of the Halo scene due to an FBI raid. He had been thriving as a programmer at Human Head Studios, a small game developer, before the feds took him into custody. During the journey to court, Pecora tried to pass along the gang members' advice, telling Lurox that much of their situation was escalated due to DAE. He encouraged Lurox to cooperate and not endure the same fate. Unlike Pecora, Lurox was granted bail and was allowed to live with his parents as his case progressed. However, his fear of prison grew so overwhelming that on June 16th, he cut off his ankle monitor and fled, paying a friend to drive him nearly 400 miles to Canada. At the border, they were flagged, and in desperation, Lurox tried to escape, stabbing himself when cornered by officers. He survived, but his bail was revoked. Pecora, Lurox, and Neshiwat all eventually received similar sentences after pleading guilty. 18 months in prison for Pecora and Neshiwat, and 24 months for Lurox. Pecora spent most of his sentence at the Federal Detention Center in Philadelphia. Following his prison term, he awaited deportation to Canada in an immigration detention facility in New Jersey, which had computers in the law library. Pecora used his hacking skills to uncover and play a hidden version of Microsoft Solitaire. Upon his return to Mississauga in October 15th, Pecora contacted his old friend, Anthony Clark, who was now facing his own legal troubles. Alcala had exposed Clark's FIFA Coin minting operation to the government. Clark and 3 others were indicted for wire fraud, accusing of making $16 million by selling FIFA coins, primarily to a Chinese businessman known only as Tao. Clark's 3 co-defendants had pleaded guilty, but he was determined to go to trial, believing he had done nothing wrong. He wondered why Electronic Arts hadn't approached him directly if they were concerned about his operation. Clark's trial took place in a federal district court in Fort Worth in November. Despite his defence's belief that the prosecution had not proven that the FIFA Coin business harmed Electronic Arts, Clark was convicted on 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Before his scheduled sentencing in March 2017, Clark died at his widow home, aged 27. People close to his family maintained that his death was an accident, the result of a deadly combination between alcohol and medication, leaving behind an estate worth more than $4 million. Former members of the Xbox Underground have each found their own path to civilian life, marked by varying degrees of success. In exchange for his cooperation, Austin Alcala received a lenient sentence, avoiding prison time altogether. He enrolled at Ball State University and even made the Dean's List. At his 2016 sentence hearing, Alcala brought his girlfriend, his first real girlfriend, and spoke about a presentation he had given at an FBI conference on infrastructure protection. The judge commended him, saying the world is your oyster. Nathan Lurox's co-workers at Human Head Studios wrote letters to the court in support of his character, emphasizing his intelligence and kindness. They believed he had a promising game development career ahead of him and expressed confidence that he wouldn't jeopardize it again. Upon his release from prison, Lurox returned to Madison and rejoined the company. Sanado Neshiwat, who was 28 at the time of his arrest, faced a more challenging path. He struggled with addiction and was re-arrested for violating his probation due to drug use. his probation officer reported that he admitted to consuming up to 50 bags of heroin per day before seeking rehab. As for Dylan Wheeler, who had been a juvenile during most of the hacking activities, the US authorities left his prosecution to the Australian authorities. Wheeler chose to evade the legal proceeding by fleeing to the Czech Republic, his mother's native land. His mother was thrown in prison by the Australian authorities for aiding his escape, likely in an attempt to pressure him into returning to face justice, although she has since been released. Wheeler remained a fugitive, travelling across Europe using an EU passport and even attempting to crowdfund the purchase of a $500,000 Ferrari, claiming it was for coping with the anxiety caused by his legal troubles. The campaign was not a success. David Bakura, now 26, felt disoriented during his first months back in Canada, concerned that the time in prison had negatively impacted his abilities due to the lack of intellectual stimulation. However, he reunited with his girlfriend, resumed his studies at the University of Toronto, and managed to finance his education by taking a freelancing programming project for user interface automation tools. Despite his financial struggles, he longed for the days when he earned substantial amounts of money from Call of Duty. Upon learning of Anthony Clark's death, Bakura experienced a brief resurgence of bitterness towards Alcala, who had played a significant role in the government's case against Clark. Yet, he eventually let go of his anger, understanding that harbouring a grudge against his former companions wouldn't benefit anyone. Bakura still grapples with how his love for programming transformed into an obsession that changed his moral compass so severely. He insists that his initial intentions were driven by intellectual curiosity rather than any financial gain. He reflects, I wanted access to companies to read some source code. I wanted to learn. I wanted to see how far it could go. That was it. It was just really intellectual curiosity. I didn't want money. If I wanted money, I would have taken all the money that was there. But I get it. What it turned into, it's regrettable. Although Bakura knows he remains unwelcome in the gaming industry, he has been seeking full-time employment since completing his computer science degree in June. Rebuilding his portfolio has proven challenging, as Canadian authorities, at the FBI's request, seized all his computers before his arrest. Most of the software he developed during his Xbox Underground days has been lost forever. Despite the setbacks, Bakura continues to cherish his 2013 Volkswagen, which he adores so much that he was willing to drive to Delaware for a bumper. He keeps it parked at his parents' house, in Mississauga, where he first played a game at the age of 2, and has called home ever since his release from prison.